Nava Atlasl. We just had a great sandwich at your suggestion.
We had a chickpea and arugula sandwich from Witchcraft right here in the park.
An idea for your next cookbook, but you have so many. How many have you done?
Well, I would say 12-ish, because a lot of them have also been revised. But I think I'm getting up to about 12 original titles. Two most recent, well, there's 4 recent ones. They're all vegan. Vegan soups and hearty stews for all seasons, which is actually in its 4th edition. That's a real classic of mine. Everybody loves soups and stews, and I think it's still the only vegan soup book on the market, which is a very lucky thing.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Vegan Express for all of us busy vegans. Vegan Holiday Kitchen for those times where everybody cooks. Passover, Easter, Thanksgiving.
Many times when people first become vegan, they wonder right away, what am I going to fix for the holidays?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, this book is a 21st century version of a book I did many years ago called Vegetarian Celebrations. And I did it because I saw that every time the Thanksgiving and Passover rolled around, I would always get lots of phone calls. I mean, that's back when people actually used the phone. And they would say, you know, my son is bringing his vegetarian girlfriend, or my so-and-so just went vegetarian. What am I going to do? I mean, it was panic time. How am I going to serve somebody at Thanksgiving if they don't eat turkey? So, you know, the idea for that book was born. And it remained in print for many years, and the new version is just a really gorgeous book with lots of great color photos by Susan Voisin, who is one of the most popular vegan bloggers on Fat-Free Vegan Kitchen. And she just did some really stunning, really festive photography for the book.
And what is her blog?
It's Fat-Free Vegan Kitchen.
What do you say to people? What do I do instead of the turkey?
Well, you know, now there are really so many answers. You know, I said, how long do you have? I'll tell you what to do. But my favorite thing still is to do a stuffed squash. It's festive, and people sort of like the idea of something stuffed inside something else, and this is just a compassionate way to do so. But, you know, anything hearty and casserole-ish, like I like to make sometimes tortilla casseroles that incorporate corn, beans, and squash. So those are the 3 sisters of the Native American crops. So anything that is kind of symbolic of the holiday. And in fact, the first Thanksgivings celebrated the harvest. They did not celebrate fowl of the air. That's what really they were for. So I feel like I'm really honoring the original intent of the holiday.
What do you put in your stuffed squash?
I try to also adhere to the 3 sisters,
Want to be
corn,
sure.
beans, and squash. So you have the squash, you empty out the squash, and then you use what you emptied out. You leave a nice firm shell, maybe a ½ an inch, and you can combine that with beans and any kind of grain. I think quinoa is a really great thing to stuff vegetables with these days, and it's great because everybody can have it. A lot of the grains now people are staying away from, like bulgur, couscous, because they have gluten. And it's amazing how so many people have developed gluten sensitivity these days. So quinoa seems universal. It's a really high protein grain. It cooks very quickly. It's quite tasty. It's a no-lose proposition for anybody. And it's
Now,
really
do you
good for
happen to
every day.
put any dried fruit in it, or what else might go in there?
Dried fruit, of course, starting with a saute of onions and garlic, fresh herbs, your favorite seasonings. It's really all very flexible.
Now, I cut you off before you mentioned the last book.
Oh, that's called Wild About Greens. And greens are a great way for vegans to get calcium, especially. It's a wonderful source of highly absorbable calcium, probably much better than taking a calcium supplement. You don't know if it's going to absorb, you don't know what the source of the calcium is, but greens are great, and everybody loves them nowadays. And I thought, why isn't there a great book about greens? There isn't. So I thought, well, you know what, then I better write it.
And I'm noticing even teenagers are beginning to go to greens. The more they learn about...
Everybody loves kale.
Yes.
There's t-shirts that say Kale University.
What is your favorite way to use kale?
I have 2 favorite uses for kale. One is to slice it really thin and massage it with olive oil and use it as a base for a salad. Massaged kale salads are very big in the raw community. And I can see why. It's delicious.
What do you massage it with?
A little bit of olive oil, just enough to coat your hands. That's all you need. You don't need to drench it. And then you could put, I really like a very simple one with dried cranberries and toasted almonds. But you can put corn and beans, or you could put cucumbers and tomatoes. I mean, it's really very flexible. It really can accommodate almost any kind of salad that lettuce can, but it's a much richer experience and a much more nutritious one. The other great thing to do with kale, especially if you have a high-speed blender, is to put them in smoothies. Put it in smoothies. Kale smoothies are also all the rage, and they really are delicious.
And then it changes the color a little bit, but you really can't taste it.
You can't taste it. It doesn't taste very green. There's certain greens if you put in smoothies. You can taste the greenness
Spinach is
of
the
it.
other one.
Yeah, spinach is very neutral. I would say collards are a little bit more assertive, but they're still good. Chard, that starts to taste kind of more grassy, and I kind of tend to like the more neutral flavors. So I like kale.
Do you use a juicer, or do you have some blender drinks?
I don't like juicing. I like juices, but if I want juice, I go down the road and have somebody else make it for me. But a high-speed blender is really easy to use. It's really easy to clean, and it doesn't waste anything. So with kale, I really like to put in frozen bananas, or maybe a little bit of apple, and some non-dairy milk, either hemp milk or rice milk, and a little bit of juice, and that's it. And it's almost a meal.
Is this recipe in one of your books?
Something like that is in the greens book. I do have a chapter on green drinks. That was essential, because people are really starting to love those.
I've also been seeing kale used in soups.
Oh, why not? Either blended or just, just like I said, sliced very thinly. And it's interesting because older books about greens would always have people take the collard greens and boil them for 20 minutes. And I thought
Until
it
they're
made
gray.
Yes, and I thought, it makes it so unpalatable. So the new way to use it, the collard greens, there's the big kind of flat leaves. So you take out the stem, and then you take a few of the leaves and stack them, and you roll them very tightly like a cigar, and slice them very thin. They look like beautiful ribbons. And then maybe shorten them a little and stir fry them. They're so delicious, and it takes 3 minutes, and they still retain the bright color and all the flavor, and you haven't boiled them to death, and all the vitamins leaching into the water.
Yeah, and there's two types of kale that we see most frequently.
Well, there's actually a few. There's the curly, and then there's the one called dinosaur or lacinato, which is also really good. And then there's
That's a little flatter and longer and darker green.
Right. And then there's the Russian kale, or sometimes it's called red kale. It's kind of a dark green and it has red tips. Yeah, I say kale is kind of the new broccoli. It does everything broccoli does and more.
What is your hope for the future?
My hope is that vegan eating, plant-based eating becomes more and more mainstream. I mean, I think when I started way back when with my first vegetarian cookbook, I'm not even sure vegan was that much in the lexicon. I didn't know much about it. It was just sort of a really radical thing just to become a vegetarian at the time. And now, when you go to a larger bookstore, there's a whole vegan section, and there's, the vegan community online is huge and very supportive, and I think it can only grow. I do still see resistance. I do still see the not wanting to know the truth aspect that we were talking about with each other. But I think in this world where so much information is available, it's going to be really that much harder to hide from the truth.
What is your website?
Okay, I am very findable. My website is vegkitchen.com. It's been online continuously since 1996. Just Google Nava Atlasl and you'll get to all of my sites, including the things that I do that are not related to food, like about women authors and my strange artwork.
I thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. This was fun.